Namaste. We are reading from the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and in this stanza, stanzas 7, 8, and 9 I will read now. The tranquil sage who has conquered the tranquil sage who has conquered the lower egoic self abides ever in the Supreme Self. He views with equanimity all the dualities, cold and heat, pleasure and pain, praise and blame. That yogi who is blissfully absorbed in the wisdom of the self is known as being unshakably united in spirit. He views with equal mind a clod of earth, a stone, and a bar of gold. He is a supreme yogi who gazes equally upon patrons, friends, enemies, strangers, peacemakers, those who cause trouble, relatives, the virtuous, and the ungodly. It's curious also that right after those who cause trouble, he mentions relatives. Often the biggest trouble comes to us through our relatives. Anyway, what Krishna is saying is that we must overcome this thought of differences, that a clod of earth is any different from a bar of gold, let us say, or that people are different. How can you reach that point? You can only do it by becoming so centered in yourself, so deeply aware of who you really are, that you see that same self in all. They are only objectifications of your own self. When you overcome the need for gold, the desire for gold, for wealth in other words, then gold and poverty, richness and poverty don't really matter to you. The idea of wealth means nothing. There was this yogi that Alexander the Great, the king of Greece, heard about when he came to India, and he asked that he come and talk with him. And he said, if you come, I'll shower untold gold on you. But if you don't come, I'll take your head off. And this yogi was sitting under a tree in the jungle, and when these messengers came from Alexander and gave him this message, he said, well, the gold you offer me is absolutely meaningless to me. And if you want to take my head, go ahead and take it. I've already realized what I've come into this body to realize, and so I'm only marking time. You can take it. So finally, the king himself had to go to this yogi to ask his questions. An interesting fact that my guru told me is that same king, Alexander, in our times was Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler also had this strange, incongruous interest in mysticism. And Yogananda, seeing that, thought that if he could win him to that interest, he would give up the other side of him, which was conquest and destruction and so on. I know that whereas in the West they call Alexander, they give him the epithet the Great. In the East they think of him as the Great Destroyer, and that's what he was. So Master tried when he went through Europe in 1935 or 36, one of the two. He tried to see Hitler. He wanted to win him, but Hitler wouldn't see him. Too bad. Master might have changed that. Instead, Master had to put that thought in his mind that he divide his forces and then in that way be destroyed. Don't think that the masters are not interested in such things as politics, in the welfare of mankind on an outward level. They want to uplift the whole world. And as long as the world is suffering, how can they think of God? They know this is Maya, but they'd rather it be a pleasant than an unpleasant dream. So God is concerned. He's interested in your being well. He's not indifferent to you. He is on your side. And if you really give your life to him, you'll be amazed how everything works out. But here Krishna is saying the way to attain that state is by being completely equanimous. Equanimous, is that the word? To have complete equanimity. And with your relatives, it's sometimes much harder. As it says, I love humanity. It's people I can't stand. I love everybody generally, but when I have to face them, then I see their qualities. And some of these are very irritating too. They may try to sue me, to destroy me, to take away my goods, etc., etc. But we have to reach that point where we are friends to everybody. I have been in situations where it was not easy to do that. I know that everybody has been, and so I'm not saying that I've suffered more than other people. I'm probably pretty average. But I have to say that it was certainly not easy to have these people actually trying to destroy everything that I wanted, to destroy the work that I was doing, to destroy my reputation, to destroy everything. One of the lawyers in one of these cases had the nickname in his own profession, the assassin. And I just had to accept it calmly. Well, I'm happy to say that I was able to, because I said to Divine Mother, it's your work, it's not my work. If you want it to continue, you'd make it so. If you don't, I don't want to do it. So it's entirely your thing. Well, this is an attitude that we need to develop. When we don't really care about the outcome, we have to give it to God. It's not that we're irresponsible, but if we're working for Him, then He will test us to make sure that we are not personally attached to it. And thank heaven I was not. Many times people have tried to, in one way or another, harm me. I've always insisted on being dharmic. There was, and I think I may have told this story before, a big forest fire that wrought devastating havoc on our community, burned 450 acres of our property. We had 900 acres at the time. It destroyed 21 of our 22 homes. My home was on the other side of the hill and it didn't come there, but it very nearly destroyed our publications building. It would have killed everything. It stopped just about that far from the building itself. There was another forest fire at Ananda village some years later, and it was coming up. Flames in great quantity were coming towards us, and the community all gathered together and raised their hands and chanted Om. And the firefighters were absolutely amazed. They said suddenly those flames, which were coming at a definite high rate of speed, suddenly the wind took them in the opposite direction, and the fire went away from what it was attacking. And our building, our publications building, it was not affected because the flames stopped right there. They didn't go further. God will protect you if you live for Him. He will protect you from everything if you live for Him. Remember this, because it's so important. People think, what can I do? What can I do? In that restlessness, they disturb the vibrations. When you're in tune with the divine, nothing will hurt you. And if it seems to hurt you, it's for your good. And if you have that kind of faith, remember, God will test your faith. So He may, in fact, take your home away. He may take your family away. There's one thing Sri Yukteswar said, it's sort of jokingly about a man who said, well, I've lost my job, I've lost my wife, my children, my wife died, my home went up in flames. I think I'll renounce everything and seek God. And Sri Yukteswar said, well, he hasn't renounced the world has renounced him. But in truth, God will never renounce you. And so if you love Him, if you give your every action to Him, you will find that in incredible ways He will support you. And I have seen this in so many ways in my life. Part of it is also having a completely positive expectation. It isn't that God always directly works. He often works through devatas, through angels, like the story of that man who was an alpinist. And he tried climbing this hill, this mountain, which was impossible almost to climb, so difficult that it was not possible to come down. And he reached the top, and there he came to a ledge, and then he found that what he had not seen from the ground, that the mountain, instead of going up like that, went out like this, so that he had to go upside down to reach the top. It was impossible to go down, it was impossible to come up. And he thought, oh, the only possible thing that makes any conscious, rational sense is to sit here and starve to death. No one would ever find him there. And he said, well, I might as well die trying as dying just giving up. So he started to climb. And of course, as soon as his body went upside down, it fell to the ledge. And he fell again and fell again. And he did it about 25 times. His body was all bruised, but he just said, I'd rather die trying than die starving. And about the 25th or 6th time, as he was going up, and just as he was about to get upside down, a force pushed him against the mountain, and he came up to the top and then was able to walk down easily. Now, this was a miracle. I don't think God did it directly. I think, however, some angelic force, some spiritual force did do it. And what happened in that case was that when you put forth every bit of effort that you can, the higher forces do help you. Having a positive attitude is very important. And I have found that this attitude also is a part of having faith in God, even though at that age I did not know that there is a God. I had been to church, and I felt that what the churches taught me was not giving me what I wanted. And so anyway, I remember, for example, well, I've told you the story, but it's well worth it. Everything that I tried to do, somehow I succeeded in it. I wanted to get to pass an exam, and I found that I just was absolutely sure I would pass it. I had no reason to be sure. I didn't ever come to class. I didn't know the language. I could translate words like and the, but I hardly knew anything. And the professor would say, well, what's the use of... Some people might as well not come to this exam. And everybody in the class would look at me and laugh. But I was absolutely certain I was going to pass. That positive thought was what got me through. I don't suppose it was God who did it directly. He may have done it through my guru. He may have done it through good karma. We don't need to differentiate. We need to understand that there's a higher power and a lower power. And if you are positive, even if you're an atheist, you can make these principles work for you. I was not an atheist, but I was an agnostic. And I said I would study, the last week I said, I'm really going to study now. And I opened the book and it was absolutely, I had lost interest in college. And finally I left with only 6 months to go. And I have to say that my real education began after I left college. Anyway, I put the book down. I said, okay, tomorrow I'll study twice as long. Second day, I said, okay, tomorrow I'll study 3 times as long. Finally, the week ended. It was the night before the exam, Sunday night, and I hadn't studied at all. And I thought, well, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And I guess she had all the right motherly instincts, because suddenly I was sure I would pass the exam. I didn't know how. But suddenly I was given this clue. You're a Greek, I told myself. Well, knowing that I was a Greek, I removed from my mind the main obstacle, which is the thought that this is Greek to me. This is difficult for me. It's something I don't know, something I'll never need, etc., etc. But when I thought of it as being my language, suddenly I found myself in tune with what it takes to be a Greek. I was actually in tune with the language. And I studied for 2 hours very intensely. But somehow, it was a very difficult exam. Only 2 people passed it, but I was one of them. You will find that in amazing ways, if you are positive, if I had gone to that exam thinking it's difficult, I wouldn't have passed. I had the same thing with music. I never went to class. I never did any assignments. And when I went to the exam, I sat on the steps and was reading the boldface rules for composition. And I went into the examination room, and I was just very cheerfully expecting to get a good grade on the exam, not knowing anything. But there was we were asked to write a melody for a figured bass, that it would fit with that bass. Suddenly, into my mind came this beautiful Oriental melody, and it fitted beautifully, so I wrote it, and the professor was so pleased with that melody that he gave me a passing grade. you will see that if you approach life positively, you see your attitude has a magnetic power. Every thought is a vritti. Every desire is a vritti. It's a whirlpool. It'll draw energy into itself. And if you have positive thoughts, you will draw to yourself what you expect. If you have negative things, fears and so on, fear is your worst enemy, because it develops that negative vortex which will draw to you the very thing that you fear. So Krishna too in these things is saying, have that positive attitude that will help you to see that all things are equal. They're all a part of yourself, and in that you can always be calm, always be happy and even-minded. And in that happy even-mindedness, you attract all good to yourself. And in your inner kingdom, all those relatives and friends and enemies and everything, when people are your enemies, don't take it personally. They're the enemies of their own self. But you always try to seek. Tomorrow I will sing you a song that I wrote after having an encounter with somebody who styled himself as my enemy. The thing is that if you can see everybody as your friend, then their problems, their negative opinions of you become their problem, but they don't have to be your problem. Look on everyone as a friend. And even when you go in crowds and see people, most of whom you don't know, think consciously, these are my friends. They're children of God. Smile at them. You'll be surprised if you smile in that way, how many strangers will smile back. They will feel your friendship for them. Be a friend to everybody. Be a friend to that higher side that will uplift them. Joy to you.